When Donald Trump ran, promising numbers, the likes of which we have never seen before, I don't think he meant record measles cases, but that is where we are today. This is a public health emergency, and it is happening again. Measles is a disease that the United States kind of defeated more than 25 years ago. And as I've told you over the last year or two, it is roaring back. Kids are being hospitalized. And it is all because Donald Trump handed public health to two of America's loudest anti vax cranks, Trump himself and RFK Jr. Now, what's fascinating is Trump gets all of his vaccines. Trump's anti vax is a political tool. Personally, he's like, of course I'm getting vaccinated. And quite frankly, I don't even know that he believes this crap, but it's politically useful to him. We're only in July, and the United States has already recorded almost 2,300 measles cases. This is the highest number in 35 years. It has now surpassed last year, and it is only July. Now, of course, more than 90% of infections are people who are unvaccinated or have unknown vaccination status. Utah, 90% of those hospitalized, unvaccinated. Most needed IV fluids. More than 60% needed oxygen. Almost 30% got pneumonia because of measles. This is what happens when powerful people poison trust in vaccines. And we have seen this building because even before Donald Trump became president for the second time, we had this sort of vaccine skeptical rhetoric of the end of Trump's first term and continued anti-vax rhetoric that grew because President Biden simply oversaw the vaccination distribution program of the COVID vaccines. And so it kept building and building. And you've got all of these enclaves that, for one reason or another, have convinced themselves and others and parents that kids simply don't need to be vaccinated. And in fact, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. spent decades pushing the debunked idea that maybe vaccines cause autism. Now, should that be investigated? Of course, if vaccines really caused autism, we would want to know. But it's been investigated, and we're working on a deeper dive about this at some point over the next couple of weeks. Donald Trump falsely claimed kids get 80 different vaccines and suggested parents break up the MMR vaccine, even though, number one, there's no evidence that that's safer. And number two, you can't get those individual vaccines in the United States. I have a lot of pediatrician friends who say parents come in and they go, listen, I want to vaccinate my kids against measles, mumps, and rubella, but let's give them the individual vaccines like Trump suggested. And my pediatrician friends look at the parents and go, those vaccines aren't available in the United States because the MMR is the default. It's safe. It works. We don't have these individual vaccines. Trump then made maybe the most famous vaccines conspiracy theorist, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And RFK loves presenting vaccination like a personal choice, but measles doesn't respect the boundaries of your personal choices because an unvaccinated person can carry measles into a pediatrician's office and expose a 6-month-old baby or a kid getting chemo or someone whose immune system can't respond properly to the vaccine. And those people never chose to assume that risk. They depend on everybody else maintaining community immunity. One of my pediatrician friends has had 4 cases of measles, works in a part of the country where this anti-vax stuff is more common. And he's had really wacky conversations with parents where they bring a kid in and he asks, this is in an ER, so they don't necessarily have all the medical records. Is your kid vaccinated? And they go, yes, absolutely. Okay. Hangs out for a bit. They do some initial investigation. My friend goes back to the parents and goes, listen, we suspect that this is measles. You're sure your kid's vaccinated? And they go, oh, not against measles. And then now all of a sudden they've got to contact trace everybody who was in the waiting room in the ER and might have been exposed. It's a mess. Now notice how backwards the anti-vax standard of evidence becomes. A vaccine safely given to hundreds of millions of people must answer every speculative question imaginable. And meanwhile, if it's a Facebook post or a conspiracy video or some discredited autism claim, that alone is enough evidence that parents should think about not vaccinating. And they magnify these extraordinarily rare vaccine risks, and they act like getting measles is no big deal. And that's where the excuse comes in. Measles isn't really dangerous. It's been a long time since people were regularly dying of measles, but they don't understand that the reason Americans rarely die of measles is because of the vaccine. If you go before the vaccine in 1963, measles infected 3 to 4 million Americans a year, hospitalized about 50,000, caused brain swelling in about 1,000 a year, and killed about 500 people annually. Vaccination drove the case numbers down 99%, and measles was declared gone in the United States in the year 2000. And so they use the low death toll today to go, we don't need vaccines. Nobody's dying of it. Right. Because of the vaccine. It's like saying we don't need seatbelts because people aren't really going through windshields in car crashes. They're not going through the windshields because of the seatbelts. 1 in 5 unvaccinated Americans who gets measles ends up in the hospital. That's an insane rate. And about 1 in 1,000 has that brain swelling that can cause permanent damage. So this is a great example. I was actually in Sacramento on Nasty Gavin Newsom's podcast. It's going to be out today. And one of the things I talked about with him, which I write about in my new book as well, pay attention, is when I meet people who say, I'm not really into politics, this is a great example of how politics is how Trump gained the power to choose RFK Jr. to be in charge of American public health. And it led to a record high number of measles cases. Elections decide who controls policy and who is in charge of disease surveillance and the agencies that are responsible for containing outbreaks. The leaders we elect reach into doctors' offices and into our kids' schools and into our bodies. And Trump and Kennedy turned one of the biggest victories of medicine into a political target. And now you've got frightened kids struggling to breathe. The U.S. may lose its measles elimination status. And this is what anti-vax politics looks like when it leaves the internet. It's not just on Facebook. It migrates into the lungs of our kids. So that's where we stand. A new record. Trump said he would set records. I don't think he meant a record number of measles cases, but that's where we are today, and we've got to deal with it. Thanks for watching. Check out this other video. And if you like our content, make sure to subscribe so YouTube puts our videos in your feed, and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple.